Her fox ears shot upright, stew dripping from the spoon she'd stolen. Wide golden eyes locked on the human behind her. He only said, voice calm and low, "It's okay. Go on. Eat." She only meant to steal a bowl of stew, but instead, she found the one human who wouldn't chase her away. This is their story, so settle in, and if you enjoy tales of love and survival, don't forget to subscribe for more. The frontier cabin smelled of simmering herbs and firewood, a rare island of warmth on a cold, alien world. The man at its hearth lived alone, by choice, or maybe by punishment, even he wasn't sure anymore. But tonight, he wasn't alone. From the shadows of the doorway came a thief, barefoot and half-wild, with a brush of red fur and ears that twitched at every sound. She hadn't come for gold, or for weapons. She had come for the scent rising from his pot of stew. And when she dipped her spoon, trembling but desperate, he turned, catching her in the act. She froze like a startled animal, tail bristling, golden eyes wide. The spoon trembled in her hand, stew dribbling back into the pot with a soft hiss. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. The man stood a few paces back, one hand still on the wooden spoon he'd been using to stir. His frame was solid, sun-browned, shoulders broad from years of hard work. The look he gave her wasn't angry, or even surprised. Just steady. Calm. "It's okay," he said again, softer this time. "If you're hungry, eat." Her lips parted, but no words came. Instead, her ears flicked twice, listening, testing for hidden danger. Her nostrils flared, taking in the smell of stew, smoke, and him. She looked as though she expected a trap, as though kindness itself might be a weapon. Then, with a sharp twitch of her tail, she darted for the door. The man let out a slow breath. He could have stopped her easily, she was quick, but he'd faced quicker things in the border wars. Instead, he turned back to the pot, stirred once, and ladled out a second portion. He set the bowl down on the table by the open window, where the night wind could carry its scent. "You know where it is," he murmured, half to himself. That night, he ate alone. But in the quiet, he thought he heard faint footsteps circling the cabin, hesitant and light. The next evening, he cooked again. A thick stew with root vegetables and spice broth. He left the bowl by the window once more, then sat with his own meal and pretended not to notice. This time she came closer. He saw her reflection in the glass, her hair a wild curtain of red, ears perked, eyes gleaming like molten gold. She crouched low, watching him. When she thought he wasn't looking, she snatched up the bowl in both hands and vanished into the trees. He smiled faintly. On the third night she lingered. He didn't turn when the floor creaked, but he knew she'd slipped inside again. The air shifted, the musk of the forest clung to her fur, earthy and sharp. He stirred the pot lazily, then set the ladle down. "You don't need to steal," he said, voice even. "There's enough for both of us." Silence. Then a sound, the faint scrape of claws against the wood floor as she edged closer. He reached for another bowl, set it on the table, and filled it without looking at her. "Here." The foxwoman froze again, eyes locked on him, every muscle taut. Her tail twitched once, twice, betraying her indecision. Slowly she approached. She didn't sit, just crouched on the balls of her feet, like she was ready to spring away at the first sign of danger. Her ears flattened and lifted, scanning the silence as if the walls themselves could attack. But hunger won. She took the bowl, sniffed once, then began to eat. The man said nothing, watching only from the corner of his eye. She didn't use the spoon, just drank straight from the rim, sharp teeth glinting. When the broth dribbled down her chin, she licked it away without shame. "Name?" he asked quietly. Her ears flicked up. She looked at him like the word itself was a puzzle. Then, at last, her voice came, raspy and used, but clear enough. "Nera." He nodded once. "I'm Lucan." And that was all. Over the next week, it became routine. He cooked. She came. At first, she only stayed long enough to eat, crouched silent and tense. But little by little, her wariness eased. Sometimes, she sniffed at his spices before he added them, nose wrinkling, tail wagging faintly when the scent pleased her. Other times, she sat cross-legged on the floor, watching the flames as if hypnotized, ears swiveling toward every crack of wood. Lucan never pressed her with questions. He spoke casually, about the weather, the soil, his repairs on the cabin, just enough to fill the silence without demanding answers. And though Nera rarely replied, she listened. He could tell by the way her ears tracked his voice, tilting subtly when he said something she didn't understand. Once, she startled him with a laugh. He muttered about the stew boiling over, cursing softly, and her tail gave an amused flick as she echoed his curse under her breath, rolling the strange human word on her tongue with mischief. Lucan turned, blinking at her in surprise. Her smile was quick, sly, gone in an instant. But it was real. As nights passed, the cabin no longer felt as empty. Her presence was a quiet thing, slipping through the doorway without knocking, crouching by the fire, tilting her head at him with those sharp, curious eyes. She still moved like a creature half wild, tail brushing against walls, ears always alert. But there was a shift in the air, a sense that she was testing the edges of something she hadn't known in a long time: safety. Lucan, for his part, found himself cooking more than usual. Not just enough to survive, but enough to share. One evening, as the sun sank crimson beyond the tree-line, he watched her sip stew with both hands cradling the bowl. The firelight caught her hair, painting it copper and gold. Her tail swayed gently, slow and contented, brushing against the wooden floor with a soft whisper. For the first time in years, Lucan realized, he wasn't just feeding someone. He was waiting for them. The nights blurred into a rhythm. He would cook. She would appear. And though Nera still slipped inside like a thief, her movements had softened, less of a fugitive, more of a guest who hadn't quite admitted she was one. Lucan caught her the first time she tried sneaking a second helping. She thought he wasn't watching, creeping her clawed fingers toward the pot. Her ears twitched in guilty rhythm, tail sweeping behind her like a banner of betrayal. "Careful," Lucan said without turning from the counter. "That stew bites back." Nera froze, bowl half tilted. Slowly, her golden eyes darted to his back. He glanced over his shoulder, brow arched in mock seriousness. "The last thief it caught still hasn't come back," he added. Her ears flattened, then twitched upward again as she caught the humor in his tone. A tiny, reluctant grin curled her lips. She set the bowl down carefully, then snatched it up again in one bold move, dashing to the far side of the room with a triumphant laugh. Lucan shook his head, fighting a smile. "Mischief suits you more than fear, you know." Her grin faltered at that, as if the word fear pressed too close to truth. She ducked her head, sipping from the bowl noisily to hide the moment. Little by little, words came easier to her. She spoke in fragments at first, simple observations, questions asked with a tilted head. "Why always cook? Alone?" she asked one night, tail curled around her knees as she perched on a stool. Lucan leaned back, arms crossed, a wry smile on his lips. "Because the forest isn't known for serving fine cuisine. Unless you count boiled roots and regret." Nera blinked, then snorted. A soft, fox-like chuff of amusement slipped out before she clamped her lips shut in embarrassment. "See? Knew you had a laugh in there somewhere," Lucan said, pointing his spoon at her like he'd won a bet. She narrowed her eyes, tail flicking in mock irritation. Mischief returned quickly when embarrassment struck her. Safer, maybe. "Laugh at you," she said, smirking. "Good. Somebody has to." Her tail became a constant presence. He noticed she used it as much as her voice, sometimes brushing it along the wall absent-mindedly, other times curling it around her bowl like a shield. When she was uneasy, it lashed like a whip. When amused, it swayed in a rhythm as clear as a smile. One evening, it knocked over an entire jar of salt. Lucan turned at the crash to see her ears plastered flat, tail tips still twitching guiltily near the mess. She gave him wide, innocent eyes, too wide, too deliberate. "Uh-huh," he said, crossing his arms. "Wasn't you right?" Nera shook her head solemnly. "Must have been the wind." Her ears perked, tail wagging once at his deadpan. She gave the most unconvincing shrug in history, then crouched down to help scoop the salt with her claws. For all her sly humor, she was still timid at her core. Sometimes, when the fire popped too loud, she jumped. Sometimes, when his footsteps came too close, her ears went flat and her shoulders hunched, like she expected a blow. Lucan never commented. Instead, he slowed his movements, gave her space, and filled the silence with small, easy jokes. If she stole food from his plate, he let her. If she teased him, he teased back. And slowly, her fear loosened. One night, when he rose to fetch another log for the fire, he felt her tail brush against his arm, tentative, deliberate. When he glanced down, she was pretending to examine the stew with exaggerated focus, cheeks flushed beneath her furred ears. Lucan chuckled softly and set the log on the flames. "You're terrible at pretending, you know." Her head snapped up, eyes sharp, ears twitching indignantly. "Not pretend." "Oh? Then what was that?" She opened her mouth, shut it, then huffed. "Tail, has mind. Mischief mind." Lucan grinned, leaning back against the hearth. "Figures. Matches the rest of you." Her ears tilted uncertainly at that, half insult, half compliment. But when she caught his smile, her lips quirked into one of her own. By the end of the week, she no longer stole stew in silence. She waited for him to set the bowl across from his own, then joined him at the table, still perched like she might bolt at any second. But she stayed. And Lucan, protective though he was, found himself realizing something dangerous. He didn't just want to feed her, or keep her safe. He wanted her laughter in the cabin, her mischievous eyes watching him, her tail brushing the walls like the rhythm of a second heartbeat in his home. He didn't say it. Not yet. But he cooked extra every night, and left a second bowl waiting, because deep down, he already knew she would come. It began with the broom. Lucan came in from splitting logs one morning to find Nera standing in the middle of the cabin, tail puffed like an orange banner, broom in hand. She held it the wrong way up, bristles pointing at the ceiling as if she meant to fight an intruder. When she realized he was watching, she froze, ears flattening. "I clean," she said, her tone both defensive and uncertain. Lucan crossed his arms, leaning against the doorframe. "That's one way to do it." Her eyes narrowed. She turned the broom around slowly, jaw set in stubborn determination. Then she began swiping clumsily across the floor, scattering dust more than gathering it. Every few strokes, her tail knocked into something, jars rattled, a stool tipped. Lucan bit back laughter until one final sweep knocked the pot ladle to the ground with a clatter. Nera jumped, hissing like a startled cat, ears flat. "Easy," Lucan said, stepping forward to retrieve the ladle. "Floor's winning this fight." Nera's lips twitched in the faintest of smiles, though she quickly masked it by glaring at the broom. "Stupid stick," she muttered. "Not your fault. Took me years to master broom combat." He gave a solemn nod. Her tail gave a betraying flick of amusement. From then on, she insisted on helping. When he chopped vegetables, she hovered, sniffing every piece, stealing slices with quick flicks of her claws. When he tried teaching her to dice carrots properly, she crushed one in her hand like an apple, looked at the orange pulp, and shrugged. "You're hopeless," Lucan said, chuckling. Nera gave him a sly grin. "Hopeless, but fed." He pointed his knife at her in mock threat, but her tail swished smugly behind her. Her attempts at cooking were worse. One evening she demanded to stir the stew. He relented, handing her the spoon. She gripped it like a weapon and stirred with such force that half the broth sloshed out. "Gentle," Lucan coached. "Like you're coaxing it." Nera blinked. "Coax stew? Stew not listen." "Sure it does. If you treat it right, it treats you right." She gave him a dubious look but tried again, slower. Still awkward, but her focus was earnest. When she finally set the spoon down, she glanced at him for approval like a child showing off a drawing. Lucan nodded. "Better. See? It didn't fight back this time." Her tail wagged once, quick and unguarded, before she caught herself. She began to explore the cabin freely now. Everything fascinated her: hinges, latches, spoons. He once found her crouched by the window, tail swaying hypnotically, watching raindrops race down the glass as if they were alive. Another time, she dragged his old blanket into a heap near the fire, burrowed into it, and declared with complete seriousness, "Mine now." Lucan raised a brow. "Pretty sure that was mine first." She bared her teeth in a grin. "I find. I keep. Thieves eat last, you know." She gasped in mock outrage, clutching the blanket tighter. Then, seeing the smirk tugging his lips, her laughter spilled free, bright and genuine. It echoed through the cabin, warm as the fire. For all her mischief, timidity still lingered at her edges. When he reached for her too quickly, her ears snapped flat. When storms rolled in, she crouched low, tail curled tight, eyes darting to the door as if preparing to bolt. One night during heavy thunder, Lucan found her huddled in the corner, claws dug into the wood. She looked up, guilt and fear mixed in her gaze, as though ashamed of her own panic. Without a word, he sat beside her. "Not too close. Just close enough. Storms pass," he said simply, eyes on the fire. She swallowed, tail twitching. "Always loud? Always break things. Not this place." He tapped the sturdy wall beside them. "Built it myself. Nothing's getting through." For a long moment, she stared at him, ears flicking as if weighing his certainty. Then, cautiously, she leaned a fraction closer. Lucan didn't move. But when her shoulder brushed his, he let it stay there. From that night forward, something shifted. Nera stayed longer, sometimes until dawn. She began to hum under her breath while sweeping, or what passed for sweeping. She teased him more openly, stealing bread rolls straight from the tray, tossing them into her mouth with a grin. And when he teased back, her laughter came easier, her tail swishing without fear. Lucan caught himself watching her sometimes, the way her ears perked when curious, the way her mischief always dissolved into nervous glances, as if waiting for a punishment that never came. He found himself wanting to shield her from that fear. To give her reason to believe the cabin wasn't just shelter. It was home. One evening, as twilight painted the sky in violet and gold, she stood at the door with her usual hesitation. He was ladling stew, but this time he didn't set out 2 bowls. He set one on the table, then looked at her. "Sit," he said. Her ears twitched. "Like you? Exactly like me." For a long breath, she hesitated. Then, slowly, she stepped forward and sat opposite him. Their bowls steamed between them, the fire crackled, and Nera's tail brushed against his boots beneath the table. She didn't snatch her food. She didn't bolt. She stayed. By the 3rd week, Nera's presence was no longer an interruption to Lucan's routine. It was the center of it. She no longer came like a thief. She padded through the door openly now, ears twitching, tail swaying with a restless rhythm. If she noticed his faint smile when she arrived, she pretended not to. Her mischief thrived. She stole spoons just to watch him search for them, hid rolls of bread in impossible places, and once tied his boots together while he napped. Lucan woke, tried to stand, and went sprawling across the floor with a grunt. Nera erupted in laughter, tail thumping like a drum against the wood. "Should have seen your face," she crowed, clutching her ribs. Lucan rolled onto his back, glaring up at her. "Enjoy this moment. It's the last time you'll ever outsmart me. Promise?" she teased, grinning sharp and wide. But beneath her boldness, there was always a flicker of hesitation. When his voice sharpened in mock annoyance, her ears flicked back, eyes searching his face for real anger. Only when she saw the curve of his smile did her tension ease, tail wagging slow and relieved. Lucan noticed. He never said a word, but he made sure his laughter came first, loud enough for her to hear. It was during the chores that she began to share pieces of herself. One afternoon, while she clumsily helped mend a fishing net, she spoke softly. "My people, gone. Scattered." Lucan looked up from his nodding. "Scattered?" Her ears tilted down, tail curling tight. "Hunters came. Drove us away. Some dead. Some ran." Her voice hitched, then steadied. "I ran. Lucan tied off a knot, giving her time. You've been alone since then? Nera didn't answer, only shrugged. But her eyes flicked toward him, then away, like she was testing whether he would flinch at her truth. He didn't. He only said, No wonder you laugh so loud now. Got years of silence to make up for. Her ears perked, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Mischief came rushing back to cover the wound. Maybe I laugh, because your face funny. Lucan chuckled. Careful. Keep that up, I'll make you cook dinner. Her tail lashed once, playful, and the shadow of sorrow in her eyes faded. That night, a storm came down hard. Wind howled against the cabin walls. Rain battered the shutters. Thunder shook the ground so violently the spoons rattled on the shelves. Lucan stoked the fire higher, the flames throwing warm light across the cabin. He glanced toward Nera, expecting her to crouch in her usual corner, ready to bolt. But she didn't. She stood in the middle of the room, frozen, ears flat, tail bristled wide. Her eyes darted to the window, then the door, then to him. She looked torn between instinct and something stronger. Storm, she whispered, voice tight. Hate storms. Lucan rose, slow and steady, palms open as if approaching a skittish animal. You're safe here, he said, gentle but certain. The walls won't break. She swallowed, trembling. Storms always break things. Not this time. Another thunderclap cracked overhead, and Nera flinched hard, tail curling around her legs. For a heartbeat, it seemed she would bolt. Then, with a sharp breath, she strode toward the fire and sat down abruptly, shoulders hunched, claws dug into the blanket she'd claimed as hers. Lucan sat nearby, leaving space but not distance. He poked at the flames, letting the crackle and warmth fill the silence. For a while, she said nothing. Then, softly, You not afraid? Lucan gave a small laugh. Been through worse than weather. Nera tilted her head, studying him through the flickering light. Her ears slowly lifted, her breathing eased. Then, with visible effort, she inched closer. Her shoulder brushed his arm. Lucan didn't move. He only shifted slightly to make it easier for her. They stayed like that, side by side as the storm raged. Nera's tail curled around them both now, as though claiming him in turn. Her golden eyes reflected the fire, soft and wary. Every so often, a crack of thunder made her flinch, but each time, she pressed closer instead of pulling away. Lucan glanced down at her, voice quiet. Told you. Nothing's getting through these walls. She looked up, ears twitching. For once, there was no mischief in her smile. Only trust. And when she finally laid her head against his shoulder, he let it rest there, steady as the fire. By morning, the storm had passed. The cabin stood strong, and so did something new between them, something fragile, but real. Nera didn't rush to the door at dawn. She lingered, stretching lazily, tail brushing his leg in a casual way that made his chest tighten. See? Lucan said, smirking. Storm didn't win. Nera gave him a sly, sleepy grin. Maybe Storm gave up. Knew you too stubborn. He chuckled, shaking his head. Stubborn's gotten me through worse than rain. Her ears perked, tail swishing. Mischief returned, but softer now, no longer to cover fear, but to share comfort. And Lucan realized, the walls hadn't just held against the storm. They'd given her a reason to stay inside them. It happened on a gray morning. Lucan was mending a fence line when the sound of engines rolled over the trees. Not the distant hum of trading caravans, closer, heavier. He straightened slowly, hand drifting toward the hatchet on his belt. Nera froze where she'd been crouched in the dirt, ears pricked, tail puffed wide. Her eyes darted to him, sharp and fearful. Who? She whispered. Outsiders, Lucan said, calm but grim. He wiped his hands on his trousers, as if this were nothing more than an inconvenience. Stay inside. Nera's claws dug into the fence post. They smell me. Well, no. Not if you stay quiet. Her tail lashed, ears flat. Humans always tell. Lucan met her eyes steady. Not this one. She hesitated, breathing fast, then bolted for the cabin. He watched her slip inside, her red tail vanishing behind the door like a streak of flame. The patrol crested the hill, 2 men on battered all-terrain bikes, dust trailing behind them. Traitors, maybe, or militia. Hard to tell which was worse. Lucan leaned on his fence post casually, though every muscle in him coiled tight. The riders slowed. The one in front, a broad-shouldered man with a scar running down his cheek, lifted a hand. "Morning. Morning," Lucan replied evenly. The second rider, wiry and sharp-eyed, scanned the cabin. "Didn't know anyone else lived out this far." "Not many do," Lucan said. "Plenty of land if you're looking." Scarface spat into the dirt. "Not the friendliest soil. But it's quiet. Unless—" his eyes narrowed. "You seen anyone out here? Strangers? Heard talk of beasts wandering near the frontier." Lucan's jaw tightened, but his face remained calm. He shrugged. "Plenty of beasts. Wolves, carrion birds. Haven't seen much else." The wiry one leaned on his handlebars, gaze sharp as a knife. "That so? Cabin smells like more than one plate was set last night." Lucan didn't blink. "Cook for 2. Makes the food stretch further. Keeps the place from feeling like a tomb." Scarface chuckled. "Talks to himself, huh? Better company than most." Inside the cabin, Nara crouched by the window, ears pressed flat, every nerve trembling. She could hear their voices, sharp and suspicious. She could hear her name in their tone even when it wasn't spoken. Her claws flexed against the floor. If Lucan gave her up, if he even faltered, she would run. Run and never look back. That was what she expected, what always happened. Humans lied until it cost them nothing, then they turned. But Lucan's voice outside was steady. He didn't stammer. He didn't look toward the cabin. When the wiry man dismounted, stepping closer, Nara's breath hitched. She saw him circle the cabin through the crack in the shutters, boots crunching on gravel. His hand brushed the wall as he moved past the window where she crouched. She clapped both hands over her mouth, ears shaking. Then Lucan's voice cut across, calm and certain. "Careful wandering. Storm last week weakened some of the beams. Cabin's not friendly to strangers leaning on it." The wiry man paused, eyes narrowing. "You hiding something, settler?" Lucan's hand rested on his hatchet, not menacing, just casual. "If I was, do you think I'd be standing here talking?" For a long moment, silence stretched taut. Nara pressed herself smaller against the wall, claws biting wood. Then Scarface laughed. "Come on, Gar. Man's just cooking too much stew." The wiry one, Gar, snorted, but after a tense beat, he swung back onto his bike. "Stew's not all he's cooking," he muttered, but he let it drop. Engines roared again, fading back over the ridge. The quiet after their departure was deafening. Lucan let out a slow breath, hand finally leaving the hatchet. He turned back toward the cabin, rolling his shoulders as though shaking off a weight. When he opened the door, Nara was gone from the window. But he didn't have to look far. She was crouched in the corner, tail wrapped around herself, ears low, eyes sharp with fear. He set his hatchet on the table and sat down, calm as if nothing had happened. "They're gone." Her ears twitched, disbelief flashing across her face. "You lied." Lucan met her gaze without flinching. "Yeah. I lied." Her claws dug into the blanket beneath her. "Why?" "Because it's none of their damn business who eats at my table." Nara blinked. Her ears flicked once, twice, caught between suspicion and something softer. "But humans—" "Most humans," Lucan interrupted gently. "Not all." Her mouth opened, closed. For a long moment, her golden eyes searched his face, waiting for the catch, the trick, the cruelty she'd always braced for. But there was nothing there. Just calm, steady warmth. And for the first time, Nara's tail curled not in fear, but in the slow, tentative rhythm of trust. That evening, she didn't sit across from him. She sat beside him, close enough that her tail brushed against his leg. She ate slowly, watching him from the corner of her eye. When he caught her gaze, she looked away quickly, ears pink at the tips. But she didn't move. And Lucan, though he kept his humor light, felt the shift like a weight lifting from the room. The fragile bond between them had hardened into something stronger, something real. She had expected betrayal. He had given her protection. And in that silence, filled with the crackle of fire and the scent of stew, Nera allowed herself, for the first time, to stay without fear of running. The next few days carried a new air between them. The silence wasn't cautious anymore, it was companionable. When Nera padded into the cabin now, her steps were lighter, her tail brushing walls as though marking the space as hers. Lucan noticed she smiled more easily, her mischief sharper now that fear didn't dull it. One evening, as he stirred the stew pot, she leaned on the table with her chin propped in her hands, golden eyes watching him like a hawk. Her tail swayed lazily behind her, brushing the bench. "You stir too slow," she said slyly. Lucan smirked without looking up. "You stir like a storm." "I like my stew inside the pot, thanks." Nera snorted. "Maybe stew likes me better." He glanced over his shoulder, brow raised. "That why it tries to jump out of the pot when you touch it?" Her ears twitched. "No. It obeys me." "Oh, really?" She nodded proudly, tail swishing. "Everything does." Lucan chuckled, setting the ladle down. "Careful. Say that too loud, and I'll have to prove you wrong." Her grin sharpened. Mischief blazed in her eyes. "You? Prove me wrong? Easily. Try, human." She stuck her tongue out, fangs glinting. Lucan moved faster than she expected. One moment he was by the pot. The next he lunged, closing the distance in a heartbeat, years of soldier's reflex still alive in him. Nera gave a startled yelp as his arms wrapped around her waist, lifting her clean off the floor. Her tail went wild, thrashing like a banner in the air. "What? Put me down!" Lucan grinned up at her struggling form. "Thought you said everything obeys you." "I don't recall obeying." She squirmed, laughing despite herself, claws batting lightly at his shoulders, not hard enough to hurt. "Cheater! Too fast! Strong too," he added, spinning once before setting her down onto the bench with exaggerated care. Nera's ears were pink, her breath coming quick from the sudden play. She stared at him, caught between laughter and something deeper. Her tail curled around his arm, holding him there even as her mouth worked to form words. "You," she muttered, voice soft, slipping past her guard. "My protector." The word hung between them like lightning. Lucan blinked, the grin softening into something gentler. Protector. Not jailer, not betrayer. Protector. Nera realized what she'd said too late. Her ears shot back, eyes wide, face flushing hot. She tried to look away, but Lucan caught her chin lightly with his hand, turning her face back toward him. "You're right," he said quietly. "I'll protect you. Always." Her breath hitched, and this time, she didn't pull away. Their closeness lingered. She searched his eyes, golden and wide, tail curling tighter around his arm. He felt her trembling, not from fear, but from something new, uncertain, wanting. Slowly, Lucan leaned down. Not fast, not forceful. Just enough to give her time to pull away. She didn't. Their lips brushed, light and hesitant. Her ears twitched violently, then stilled, melting into the kiss. Her claws, sharp and trembling, caught his sleeve, not pushing him away, but anchoring herself to him. The kiss deepened, cautious but real, the fire crackling beside them. When they finally parted, Nera blinked rapidly, as though trying to make sense of what had just happened. Lucan smiled faintly. "Too much?" Nera shook her head, ears flicking wildly. "No, just never thought." She trailed off, words failing her. He reached out, brushing a strand of her red hair back from her face. "Neither did I." Her lips curved into a shy, mischievous smile. "Stew, not only thing you good at." Lucan chuckled, shaking his head. "Don't start bragging yet. You're still banned from stirring." She laughed, the sound bright, tail flicking in rhythm against his leg. But the look in her eyes had changed, no longer half-wild, no longer waiting for betrayal. For the first time, she looked at him not as a strange human in a cabin, but as something closer. Something hers. That night, Nera didn't rush for the door when darkness fell. She lingered by the fire, tail curled around herself, golden eyes glowing in the embers. When Lucan stood, she rose too, matching his steps. And when he laid his blanket down, she wordlessly slipped beside him, curling into his side with a low, rumbling purr that made his chest tighten. Her ears flicked once as she whispered, almost too soft to hear. "Protector." Lucan rested a hand on her shoulder, pulling her closer. "Always." The days that followed felt different. Nera no longer slipped out before dawn. Instead, Lucan would wake to find her still curled beside him, tail draped across his chest like a blanket. Sometimes her ears twitched in sleep, chasing dreams. Sometimes she purred softly, the sound steady as a heartbeat. At first, she pretended it was coincidence. Storm too loud. Or blanket too warm. But when the excuses ran dry, she stopped making them. She stayed because she wanted to. Lucan didn't press. He only adjusted, moving his tools to make space for her curious claws, cooking larger portions, listening when she rambled about scents in the air or the way shadows looked different on storm nights. The cabin, once silent, now breathed with laughter and motion. One afternoon, while Lucan was hauling water, Nera decided to help again. He returned to find her crouched on the counter, inspecting a sack of flour with intense suspicion. Her tail swayed like a metronome, ears twitching as she sniffed the sack. "What exactly are you doing?" he asked, setting the buckets down. Nera glanced over her shoulder, flour dust already streaked across her nose. "Flour smells strange." "It's supposed to." She frowned, claws poking at the sack. "Maybe poisoned." Lucan chuckled. "Poison that makes bread? That'd be a new one." She narrowed her eyes, then deliberately tore the sack open. White powder exploded across the counter and floor. Nera froze mid-swipe, blinking through the cloud. Lucan sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "You're worse than the storms." Her ears drooped, tail curling. For once, mischief faltered. "I tried." Lucan's irritation vanished as quickly as it came. He stepped forward, brushing the flour off her nose with his thumb. "I know you did." Her eyes widened, golden and vulnerable. Then, slowly, a small smile tugged at her lips. "Better than storm, though." "Much better," he admitted with a grin. That night, as they sat by the fire, Nera spoke more than she ever had. She told him about her people, how they lived close to the forests, how scent and instinct guided them, how their laughter was loudest when the moon was high. Her words were halting, her accent rough, but her eyes shone with memory. "They said humans cruel," she murmured, tail curling around herself. "That humans never keep promises. That humans break what they touch." Lucan watched her quietly, letting the silence settle. Then he said simply, "They're not wrong about some. But they're wrong about me." Her ears flicked, eyes narrowing as if testing him. "Why?" He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Because I've lost enough. I'm not about to lose something worth holding on to." Nera's tail stilled, her breath caught. Mischief didn't come this time. Instead, she leaned into him slowly, pressing her forehead against his shoulder. "Then, I stay," she whispered. The words changed everything. From then on, Nera didn't hover at the edge of belonging. She claimed it openly. Her blanket remained by the fire, her bowl stayed on the table, her laughter filled the cabin like it had always been meant to. And Lucan, who once measured his life in solitude and silence, found himself smiling at the chaos of flour dust, the clatter of dropped spoons, the sudden weight of a foxtail curling around his leg when he least expected it. Their romance bloomed not in grand declarations, but in the small, undeniable things. The way Nera stole bites from his plate only to push the better pieces onto his. The way Lucan reached for her hand as they walked the fence line, steadying her when she stumbled. The way she purred when his arms circled her waist, a sound she tried to stifle but couldn't. One evening, as twilight bled across the sky, Nera perched on the table, watching him split kindling. "Lucan!" He glanced up. "Yeah?" She hesitated, ears flicking. Then, softly, "Mine!" He paused, the axe halfway down. When he looked at her, her cheeks were flushed, but her golden eyes were steady. Her tail swayed once, deliberate. Lucan let the axe rest. A slow smile spread across his face. "Yours." Nera's grin broke free, wide and unguarded. She hopped down, crossing to him in 2 quick strides, and pressed her lips to his with all the certainty of someone who had finally chosen where she belonged. That night, as they lay together beneath the warm blanket, her tail curled around him, Nera whispered a word she hadn't used since the first slip. "Protector." Lucan kissed her temple gently. "Always." And for the first time, the cabin felt less like a fortress against the wilderness, and more like the beginning of a home. Morning in the cabin no longer smelled only of wood smoke and stew. It smelled of her, wild forest musk softened by the faint sweetness of her hair, of fur warmed by the fire. Lucan had grown used to waking with a red tail draped across his chest and golden eyes blinking sleepily at him from the pillow. Nera, of course, pretended this wasn't intentional. The first few mornings she claimed she had simply rolled wrong. But the way her claws clutched his shirt, and her tail wrapped tighter whenever he shifted told another story. Lucan teased her about it once. "You roll wrong every night?" Her ears had gone pink, and she'd snapped back. "Blanket follows me. You follow blanket." He had only laughed, tugging the blanket tighter around them both. "Good thing I like where it takes me." Her presence filled every corner of his days. When Lucan chopped wood, Nera insisted on helping. She carried logs in both arms, tail swinging proudly behind her. More than once, she toppled under their weight, vanishing in a crash of bark and fur. Lucan rushed to haul her out, only to find her laughing through the pile. "You think this funny?" he asked, brushing splinters from her hair. Nera grinned, sharp teeth flashing. "Yes. You worry too much. And you don't worry enough." Her ears perked. "That's why we balance." Lucan shook his head, but he couldn't stop the warmth blooming in his chest. Cooking became their daily ritual. Nera perched on the counter, tail swaying dangerously close to the flame, while Lucan worked. She snatched vegetables from the chopping board, daring him to catch her hand before she could steal them. He always did, faster than she expected, his grip firm but playful. "You forget I've still got soldier's hands," he said one night, catching her wrists before she nabbed a potato slice. Her ears twitched. Mischief sparked in her eyes. "Soldier hands, but soft heart." Lucan's laugh was low. "Don't spread that around. You'll ruin my reputation." Nera leaned forward, slipping the stolen potato between her teeth anyway, grinning as she chewed. "Already ruined. Mine now." Evenings were their favorite. After chores, they sat by the fire, her head resting on his shoulder, his hand absently stroking the fur of her tail. At first she hissed when he touched it, tail twitching with instinctive warning, but over time, she let him. Eventually, she sought it. One night, she flopped across his lap without warning, tail coiling around his arm. "Comfort," she muttered. Lucan raised a brow, amused. "You're getting bold." Nera purred, eyes half-lidded. "Protector allows it." "Protector doesn't get much choice anymore, does he?" Her sly smile answered for her. Despite the ease between them, Nera still carried the wildness of her people. When birds cried in the night, her ears snapped upright. When the wind shifted, she sniffed the air and announced changes in the weather before Lucan even noticed. Once, while they walked the ridge together, she stopped suddenly, crouching low. Lucan tensed, hand on his knife. But Nera only pointed at a berry bush. "Food." Lucan blinked, lowering his blade. "I thought you'd scented danger." She grinned, tail swishing. "Danger is not eating these first." Lucan groaned, but he ate them anyway, shaking his head at her mischievous delight. It was in these small, ordinary moments that their bond grew strongest. Not through storms or lies, but through laughter and stolen bites, flower clouds and tangled blankets. One evening, as Lucan washed the day's grime from his hands, he caught sight of her crouched by the fire, tail curled around her knees, golden eyes following him. "What?" he asked, drying his hands on a cloth. Nera tilted her head. "Still strange." "What is?" Her ears twitched. "I sit here, eat your food, sleep in your bed. No chains. No fear." Lucan crossed the room, crouching before her. He placed a hand against her cheek. "Steady? That's because this is your home now." Her breath trembled, tail flicking. Then she smiled, a small, mischievous smile that softened into something far more tender. "Then you mine? Home and protector." He chuckled, leaning forward to kiss her softly. "I was yours the moment you stole that stew." Her laughter rang warm against his lips, her tail curling around him like a promise. The cabin no longer felt like Lucan's. It felt like theirs. Nera's blanket remained piled near the fire, but she hardly used it anymore. Most nights she wound herself around him instead. Her claws caught at his shirt in sleep, her tail curled across his stomach, her ears twitching at every shift of his breath. He had once lived in silence so deep it pressed on his bones. Now, the quiet was filled with her soft purrs and the occasional grumbled word when he shifted too much. "Stay still," she mumbled one night, half asleep, dragging the blanket tighter over both of them. "I thought you liked my warmth," Lucan teased. Nera's tail flicked against his leg. "Yes. But you wriggle." Lucan chuckled, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Guess I'll just have to sleep like a stone." "Good," she murmured, already drifting again. "My stone." Her wildness never left her, but it softened in his presence. She still prowled the treeline some mornings, ears sharp, nose to the wind. She still startled at distant thunder, claws flexing instinctively. But instead of running, she returned to him. "Always." Lucan once asked her why. Nera paused, golden eyes glimmering in the firelight. Then, with a slight tilt of her head, she said, "Protector waits. Protector feeds. Protector laughs at me, not fears me." He raised a brow. "You say that like it's rare." Her ears flicked downward. "It is." Lucan's chest ached at the truth behind those words. He brushed her hair back, pressing his forehead lightly against hers. "Then they were fools." Nera purred low in her throat, tail coiling tight around his waist. Some nights were light-hearted chaos. She once stole his shirt, pulling it over her small frame with triumphant laughter, as it hung almost to her knees. "Fits," she declared smugly, tail wagging. Lucan smirked. "Barely. You look ridiculous. Better than you." "Oh, really?" He lunged, sweeping her up easily in his arms. She squealed in surprise, tail thrashing as he spun her once before tossing her gently onto the bed. "Protector cheats," she gasped, laughing. "Protector wins," Lucan corrected, pinning her tail under his arm. Nera wriggled, then suddenly stilled, her eyes wide as she realized how close they were. Mischief faltered into something shy, her ears pink. Slowly, her laughter softened into a purr as she whispered, "Then, Protector keeps me." Lucan kissed her, sealing the promise without hesitation. "Always." Days turned to weeks, and the rhythm of their life became as steady as the seasons. Work, laughter, warmth, and quiet intimacy. Nera's mistrust melted into loyalty so fierce it startled even her. Once, when a hawk swooped too close while Lucan worked outside, she leapt from the porch, claws flashing, sending it screeching skyward. Lucan had doubled over laughing. "You planning on guarding me from birds now?" Nera's ears burned pink. "Bird too close." "Uh-huh." She huffed, tail lashing. "Protector foolish. Needs second protector." Lucan only smiled, kissing the top of her head. "Then I'm lucky." One night, Lucan woke to a faint shift of weight on the bed. He blinked groggily, the fire's last embers painting the room in dull red. Nera was crawling closer, moving slowly so as not to wake him. When she saw his eyes open, she froze, caught mid-motion. Her ears flicked wildly, cheeks flushing. Couldn't sleep? Lucan asked, voice low and amused. She hesitated, then slid beside him, curling her body tight against his. Her golden eyes met his in the dark, shy but certain. No, she whispered. Needed here. Lucan reached out, resting a hand gently against her back, pulling her closer. Then here's where you stay. She pressed her face against his chest, the heat of her blush warm even through his shirt. Her purring began, soft and steady, vibrating against him. And Lucan smiled into the dark, realizing that this sound, the low, contented hum of a fox girl who no longer feared, who no longer ran, was all the proof he would ever need that he had made the right choice. Morning came with sunlight spilling through the shutters. Nera stirred, blinking groggily, her ears twitching at the sound of birdsong. She found Lucan already awake, watching her with a faint smile. What? She muttered, rubbing her eyes. Just thinking. Dangerous. She teased, voice still heavy with sleep. Maybe. He leaned in, brushing his lips across her forehead. But worth it. Her tail curled around him, holding him in place. Then think of this. She murmured, eyes closing again. You stuck with me now. Lucan laughed quietly, holding her close. That's the best trap I've ever fallen into. Nera purred louder, satisfied, as the morning light warmed their bed. Far beyond the cabin, the wilderness still stretched wide and uncertain. The world was not free of danger, nor of men who would hunt someone like her. But inside the cabin's walls, trust and warmth had taken root. For the first time, Nera had not only a protector, but a home. And for the first time, Lucan had something worth protecting more than his own solitude. That night, curled together beneath their blanket, Nera whispered one last word before sleep claimed her. Mine! Lucan kissed her hair, whispering back, Always yours. And as her purr filled the dark, he knew he'd never hear a sound more perfect for the rest of his life. From one stolen meal to a bond neither of them could break. Nera and Lucan found more than safety. They found home. If you enjoyed their story, leave a like, share it with a friend, and join us next time for another journey where humanity always finds a way.